What's up, everybody? Welcome to the BR College Football Show. I'm Mike Golic Jr., former Notre Dame offensive lineman, current TNT sports broadcaster. Delighted to be with you guys here, as I am every Monday, 5 o'clock Eastern, to break down everything we saw from the world of college football this weekend. You can always check us out on the Bleacher Report YouTube, on the BR app, and make sure you head to the chat. We'll also be looking for your comments, questions all day long to try and answer them here in the next half hour as we look at everything that we got out of this last weekend in college football. Week 4, plenty of interesting stuff to get to, and better, I guess, is in the eye of the beholder place to start than with what we saw, my oh my, with the continued downward spiral of Clemson to begin this season. The Tigers now 1-3 to start the year. Dabo, Swinney feeling it at the press conference, owning this loss and following up on the emotions that we've seen from this last week as Syracuse gets the 34-21 win. Now, for Syracuse, what a win for Fran Brown and company here. Dabo Swinney right here opening up, saying, I'm not a cyborg. This is my life. I've been here 23 years. I give this place the best I've got every single day. I'll say this right off the bat. Dabo's got to own this, right? Same way he owned coming out before the season and mentioning, we were the first team to go 15-0. We could be the first team to go 16-0. They had all the returning talent on offense led by Cade Klubnik and that wide receiver core. On defense, the future first-round draft picks there. None of it has lived up to what they've expected so far. And so he does have to own that. Any notion that this could mean Dabo Swinney's future at Clemson is on the line, I think would be insane. Like, we're watching that unfold in real time for another long-time figurehead at a program at Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy, right now. I don't know what that looks like going forward as they're coming off a brutal loss to Tulsa. Dabo and Clemson were in the playoff last year, won the ACC last year. I get it's massively disappointing. Why am I bald? Because my grandfather was bald on my mom's side, and apparently that's a maternal trait. Go Irish. But no, I think for Dabo, yes, this is disappointing. And it's not for the same reasons that we've kind of given him grief for in the past, right? Like, Clemson went out and hired coordinators outside of the internal Dabo coaching tree on both sides of the ball. Tom Allen defensively, Garrett Riley offensively. And even went and got a couple of guys out of the transfer portal this year at impact spots, but they had been veteran in all the right areas, and it's just not working out. Quite honestly, domination across the lines of scrimmage, Clemson versus UNC debuting on the Cartoon Network, honestly doesn't feel far off at this point. I've been amazed to watch, and this game against Syracuse was certainly no different. Now, the numbers may not bear it out. Well, actually, to some extent it does. Syracuse, 157 yards rushing in this game, 1 touchdown, 4.2 yards per carry, even accounting some of the sack yardage there. Steve Angeli, who unfortunately now lost for the season, that injury to his, I believe, Achilles in this game. Brutal for a guy that waited his turn, was a backup in Notre Dame for the last few years, played a pivotal role in Notre Dame's playoff run coming in the second half, or the 2-minute drive against Penn State, and now have been the leading passer in the country in terms of yards thrown for going into this game. 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, 18-31 in this game. Looked awesome at the helm of an offense that was churning out yards on the ground, was making the plays through the air. Like, there were plenty of spots where on both sides, defensive backs for Syracuse, wide receivers for Syracuse, just making the plays that their counterparts on Clemson's side wouldn't. Cade Klubnik in this game, I mean, they were down early. The ebbs and flows of this game. Syracuse goes out, scores, surprise onside, gets a field goal, and then just continues to pile on points. Cade Klubnik ends this game 37-60 for 363 and 3 touchdowns. And quite honestly, when I watched this game, Cade Klubnik was not a guy before the season I believed in at the could be the number 1 overall pick level. That just wasn't what I saw. Still a very good college quarterback and a guy with a pro future. And this game, quite honestly, looked more like that. There were plenty of throws that he made that looked fine, but even with the returning production on this offense and Brian Wesco, Antonio Williams both being available in this game, there was no vertical element to their passing attack when the game was in doubt. It was way too much east-west, way too much lateral, and Syracuse defense kept changing the picture in a way that I thought did give Cade Klubnik a little bit of trouble. So I give all the credit to Syracuse on that one for making this happen. Backup quarterback Ricky Collins came in, threw for a touchdown, only 3 of 8 for 34 yards, but at that point they had gotten out so far in front. I hear the complaints. I know the ACC ended up fining Syracuse $25,000, publicly reprimanding them for violating NCAA rules regarding faking injury. Cade Klubnik was pretty vocal saying that this was happening throughout the course of the whole game. Whenever they were trying to use tempo, they had guys going down for Syracuse. The particular instance the ACC's finding them with was at the 9:25 mark in the fourth quarter. Cade Klubnik and Clemson had just made a big play, getting them down into the red zone when they had to take some time. Now, Clemson ended up scoring on that drive and was already down 34-14 at that point. Rewatching this game in the coach's copy, you're going to have a hard time selling me that this is the reason you lost. The reason you lost is because explicably on offense, because while Clemson returned production, O-line's never really been a strength of the program throughout the years, but defensively even, they were churning out tough yards on the ground. The Syracuse offensive line was able to protect Steve Angeli a bunch despite giving up sacks in this game. Angeli was sacked multiple times in this game. Clemson finished with, I believe, 3 sacks in the game on defense, but that still to me was a trench loss as much as anything else. Some of the play calling a little questionable on offense there. Dak LaRock writes in the chat, Garrett Riley underperforming or Dabo is not allowing him to be creative. I understand the idea that Dabo's, been there for so long, people come in and assimilate there, but I just think when the foundation isn't living up to it the way that you thought Clemson's offensive line would, it is hard to do some of the more creative things. And again, it's not creativity that's the issue. It's, to me, a lack of a solid foundation up front to create a consistent run game and protection, and then vertical passing game that hasn't been anywhere to be found, at least in this loss here. So Bama 76, Caleb Klubnik never proved that he was going to be a playoff caliber quarterback. I mean, he proved it last year. He quite literally was a playoff caliber quarterback, and towards the end of last season played really well in some big games. But I'm with you consistently. I didn't see the number 1 overall pick in the draft in the way that people were talking about there. All right. Someone that did pop this weekend, and quarterback will be an interesting question going forward. Now, Texas Tech, are they the real deal? I mentioned I've been calling games for the Big 12 on TNT this year. I got to take a visit to Lubbock a couple weeks ago when they dominated Kent State. They got their first real test against Utah and passed with flying colors. 34-10 was the win on the road. This was a game, and we can get to Indiana and Illinois later. This one was a lot closer than the final score indicates. Like, Indiana was a legitimate massive blowout against Illinois. Utah and Texas Tech were 2 teams, in my mind, very much on similar playing field, both led by dominant defenses. And listen, people need to stop using the price tag associated with Texas Tech's roster as a negative. Everyone else is doing it. They took it seriously and done it at a high level. I don't want to hear, oh, do you feel bad about buying a Big 12 championship? This is the way the game is played now, and they decided they wanted to go all in. And my brothers and sisters in Christ, that defense worth every penny they played. It is unbelievable to watch this group here on defense, led by, as we know, Skylar Gill-Howard, David Bailey. The rest of that defensive front, Romello Height, is playing at a completely different speed. He's like listening to podcasts on 2x speed. He is a blur. And listen, Spencer Fano, Caleb Lamo on the other side, the offensive tackles and prospective first-rounders for Utah, good. Like, I work on the Joe Moore Award, and Utah's offensive line does look like a unit that's going to be in contention for that. And it was a dogfight. Utah had to bust out extra offensive linemen, multiple tight end sets, plenty of chips and help on the way out for even those guys, as talented as they are. Devin Dampier is an incredible quarterback. Jacob Rodriguez, yes, I see you, Oswald 10 in the chat. Jacob Rodriguez in that linebacker core, to me, jumped out in a big way. I'd say Cole Wisniewski on the back end, too, the North Dakota State transfer at safety. That group was as impressive to me as anything else. And it helps when you got guys like Lee Hunter, legitimate space eaters up front, giving you room to roam. But I thought that group was sticky in coverage, came up and hit well, set the tone in a way that, Shill Wood, the defensive coordinator, should be really proud of the effort that group put on display. But that was a 13-10 game in the fourth quarter before all of a sudden the snowball effect hit and things went poorly for them. But offensively for Texas Tech, and that was sort of the question I had, was against a team that was competitively and talent-wise on the same playing field as you, how would it look? Looked pretty darn good. 173 yards rushing. Will Hammond threw for 169 yards in relief of Baron Morton, who was injured during this game. Head hit the turf. They pulled him out after he had thrown for 142 yards. Now, 2 interceptions mixed in there as well. Will Hammond comes in, throws for 2 touchdowns, leads them on multiple scoring drives. I tell you, talking to Mac Leftwich, their offensive coordinator, when we were out there, they love their quarterback room. And they had a ton of confidence in Will Hammond's ability. And during those first couple of games when they were playing against lesser competition, got to get Will a lot of work in relief of Baron Morton for the exact moments like this. I don't think there's any quarterback competition or worry here going forward. When Baron Morton's healthy, he is the guy for this team. He is not only on the field great for them in a way that I saw Dane Brugler, author of The Beast, one of the best draft analysts in the business at The Athletic, point out, doing it with some NFL traits on the field. Baron Morton maybe finally starting to get the credit, but the glue in that locker room, a guy that was so integral and important in helping Joey Maguire take all these great, highly priced parts and turn them into a team that right now seems very capable of going out. They should be the favorite in the Big 12 going forward. They should be a college football playoff contender. I know the rest of their schedule doesn't necessarily provide them a lot of other standout opportunities like this. Looking at it, they have on the road at Houston, at Kansas. Arizona State should be ranked by the time they get there if the Sun Devils keep playing the way that they are right now. BYU later in the season. The Kansas State team doesn't necessarily look the same as we thought they might be going into the year. So I think Kansas, Arizona State, BYU, legitimate opportunities for more wins that continue to provide them an opportunity to stand out. But if this isn't enough for you, you just don't want to acknowledge the Big 12 as playing quality football, because I think Texas Tech is certainly doing just that right now. That was one of the banner performances of the weekend. I thought really, really impressive stuff from them, but not going to go so far as the QB controversy. I haven't seen any update on Baron Morton, but again, I'm assuming something head-related after he got hit down on the turf, but just credit to the depth. That's the one thing is, when you talk to them there, yes, the portal guys got the top billing, but they've got depth on both sides of the ball. That receiving core stepped up in a big way. Man alive, the tight end room that they've got going on there, Terrence Carter and that tight end room, really impressive group. So they're versatile on offense. The foundation's solid up front. They're, again, deep at quarterback like we saw in this game, and defensively one of the best front sevens in all of college football. So that's a bona fide college football playoff contender who is built with that depth to make a run. That's the other thing we always talk about this day and age. You have to have depth to be able to make it through a playoff run that's going to require you to win multiple games right now. So Oswald 10 says Will Hammond for Heisman. Hey, Will Hammond for maybe like team MVP and a guy that can hold it down if you need to during this season, which again, if you get close to late in the year and you lock down the Big 12 and you feel good about where you're at, that could definitely be a possibility. All right, let's keep it moving here. Michigan, big win over Nebraska this weekend. How excited should Michigan fans be now? Sharon Moore served the last game of his suspension this season. We know he's got one more game that'll be suspended for at the start of next year. But for right now, done. Biff Poggi, man, shout out. A banner performance in the interim, helping lead them to a big road win over Nebraska, and one of the more entertaining appearances on College Game Day I've seen in a while. Him looking at Nick Saban when Saban talked about him paying players in high school and asking if he was doing that here, said, "I learned it by watching you," was laugh out loud stuff on College Game Day. So shout out to those guys. Shout out to Biff Poggi. For this game, Bryce Underwood, hey, did a good job as a part of the run game, 61 yards, but 12 of 22 passing for just over 100 yards. They still clearly are not comfortable layering them all out. And when you've got Justice Haynes in the ground game that Michigan does, when your DNA as a program is O-line coach as your head coach in Sharon Moore, that's not overly surprising. But man, oh man, that Michigan defense came to play and consistently collapsed the pocket around a quarterback in Dylan Raiola, who probably at this point, after all the fanfare coming in of the recruitment process, the Patrick Mahomes cosplay that's a little weird for me, it's a really good quarterback. 30 of 41 for 308 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. It looks easy for him, too. Like, he's not as mobile as Mahomes, but a lot of the off-platform stuff, the ability to at least be mobile within the pocket and buy them some space, like, dude's been really good. You see the stats right here. One of only 2 Power 4 quarterbacks to complete over 100 passes so far. They put a lot on him, right? 41 passing attempts, not ideal for the way that you want to win games, but you got a quarterback that's able to shoulder the load there, but did it with that defense bearing down around him. Deshaun Barham on one side for Michigan rushing the passer. The other guys they got up front on that group, credit to Wink Martindale and what they do defensively there. That's a scary, scary outfit that can get pressure with 4, presents you a lot of looks. They have a lot of really complex pressures that stress your offensive line in certain areas. And so That's the growth and maturation for this team overall. Nebraska is not a team on par talent-wise or in this stage of their program-wise with where Oklahoma is this year, with John Mateer and with Brent Venables' defense looking like a war machine. But it's a good team, and it was another quality road test in your conference for your team led by a young quarterback, and they showed improvement from that loss to Oklahoma in this game here. But again, leading with defense in the run game can get you pretty far as your floor for your team in college football. And Michigan showed their ability to do just that. So credit where credit's due on that one. Big time win for them there. For Michigan, Sherrone Moore coming back now. We'll see how they look through the rest of the Big Ten slate here. I'm not sure with that lack of explosive firepower, they're going to be ready to compete just yet. I know they've got the nice winning streak over Ohio State going, so maybe the mental edge helps there. Penn State, that offense not displaying a ton of explosive ability. Oregon, though, probably going to have to start having more of a conversation about Oregon as the year goes along because Dante Moore can rip that thing. And that offensive line is a big, bad group of bullies up front for an Oregon team that's chock full of a bunch of talent right now. For Matt Rule, again, you got the quarterback problem solved. Didn't look like a ton of playmaking on offense. Again, the O-line really struggled to hold up to all that pressure at times, losing to 3- and 4-man rushes up front. So I think that's going to create some issues. Maybe not ready for was I surprised? The question here from Tor35. Surprised Nebraska had trouble running the ball a little bit, but Michigan's defensive front is really good. It's chock full of incredible talent. Schematically, like I mentioned, they've got dudes, but they were always an extra hat in the box, rallying all 11 to the football. Like they do the cliche stuff at a really high level, and not every defense does that. They play like their hair is on fire. They get guys to the ball. They crash down from the backside. I think part of the run game issue is also Dylan Raiola, not one of those guys that's a plus runner at quarterback. Like we can talk a little bit about the Indiana win over Illinois at some point. Fernando Mendoza, because they establish early, he's a guy that will keep the football and can be somewhat effective there the same ways we saw at Cal. You got to account for that as a defense, and it creates different holes. Dylan Raiola, not really as much. That's not a guy that's as fleet of foot, and so I think that does, in modern college football, put more stress on you when you don't have a quarterback that's a dual threat. Having a true pocket passer, kind of a different lot in life at this point. So, all right, so that's an interesting look at some of the biggest ranked wins over the weekend for some teams out there. Let's play a little overreaction or not at this point. And starting this one off, UCF social department. Bravo, a callback to one of the most famed beach photos of Bill Belichick and his young girlfriend. Bill Belichick will not survive the season in North Carolina. I don't think I'd phrase it like that. I think that's an overreaction. My question is Bill Belichick going to want to be at North Carolina beyond this one season? The team looks really rough against FBS competition. We saw them get a couple of wins against Charlotte. I should say against Power 4 competition. We saw them get wins against Richmond, wins against Charlotte, the scene before the game. Like, I don't know why you guys are – I don't know why we're surprised by this. Like, she's been everywhere. Her and Bill Belichick clearly like each other. Not surprised by this at all. She's been a very evident part of the process there in Chapel Hill since she arrived. But no, I think this is an overreaction to say that Bill Belichick won't finish the season in North Carolina. I think he'll finish it. I think the proper reaction would be, does he sign up for this again next year? Especially if they miss a bowl game, continue to suffer embarrassment like this. They're going to be easy cannon fodder for a lot of the teams going against them. There is still a path for Notre Dame to make the college football playoff. Overreaction or not? No, not an overreaction. I mean, USC ranked right now, going on the road this week to take on Arkansas. You got Boise State at home still. Like the USC resume point, as long as they keep doing what they're doing and kind of get some respect going through the middle of the season and finish strong in the Big Ten, Notre Dame will have that possibility. A 10-2 Notre Dame team, provided Texas A&M also remains in the mix for the SEC, provided Miami keeps winning at the clip they're winning at right now, up to number 2 in the AP poll. There is still a path for Notre Dame going forward. Defense got to get a lot better, though. Again, you look right here, the back half of the schedule. Syracuse, by then, let's see, could be pretty interesting. Now, again, with Steve Angeli being out, that could be a little bit tough. But depending on what they are by the end of the season, that could be another resume win. I saw Pitt is retiring Aaron Donald's number the weekend Notre Dame comes to town. Navy going to be really interesting because this defense got a lot of room to improve. Chris Ash going to continue to be a name bantered about by the Notre Dame fan base who's upset with how it looked this last week against Purdue. I get you ended up giving up 30 points. One of them's in garbage time. There was a 2-hour rain delay before the flurry of points at the end of the first half came into play. And you were starting 2 true freshmen and a redshirt freshman in the secondary because your best player, Leonard Moore, was out for the week with an ankle. Your transfer nickelback from Alabama and Devontae Smith was a game-time decision. They ultimately didn't play. And your starting safety, Adon Schuler, was serving a first-half suspension for targeting. So 3 very young pieces in a secondary that had already been dealing with an identity change. I can see why some of these misplays happen. 4-man pass rush isn't there, so you got to decide who you want to be as a team. I think a more downhill, blitz-heavy team like we saw last year, give yourself some opportunities to go and maybe every once in a while you'll have a boom or bust coverage situation, but I'd rather go out with my shield or on it type situation the way they did last year, because right now trying to turn it loose with a 4-man rush just is not working. And if they couldn't get home against Purdue, I struggle to see a world where they do that against the better competition. I saw a fight on the timeline and in the chat in there. That would be pretty tough to overcome against a team like USC, who is protecting pretty well up front and giving Maava a good chance to spray to those wide receivers. So not an overreaction there, though. This is the year Miami doesn't fall apart, overreaction or not. I'll say not an overreaction. I mean, right now, Miami looks well-constructed on both sides of the ball. Now, I had a conversation with David Ubben today from The Athletic that said maybe there's not a truly remarkable trait to Miami, but man, offensive line, war machine, doing a great job protecting Carson Beck, who has been one of the most dependable quarterbacks. We'll get to that tree in a little bit on the show as we kind of gauge who we've got trust in going down the home stretch of the season. And defensively, Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor are the front end of that group that's been structured much better this year and is playing much better football under the new guys and the new coordinator. I think right now, especially in the current ACC, where Clemson certainly down the way they are, Georgia Tech we know is going to have their day in court. SMU had a tough finish to the last Iron Skillet game this last weekend, at least for the time being. So it does line up well to where I think Miami can hold on this year. Florida State going to be the fascinating one coming up this weekend, but I think both of those teams right now look like playoff teams. The ACC and the Big 12, the conversation is going to be every year who can get multiple in. Both look like they're well positioned to do it right now, but we'll see. The Big 10 and the SEC obviously are going to hog a lot of that airspace, and understandably so given the quality of teams there. Last but not least, there is not a clear number 1 overall best team this year. I'd say that's not an overreaction. You can make an argument for certainly Ohio State, who sits at that number 1 spot right now. Miami could absolutely be in the mix for that. LSU on their best day. Georgia, after a great win against Tennessee, a lot of people wanted to have in that conversation. Oklahoma, even Florida State, depending on how they keep playing here, I think that could be a fascinating team in that conversation, depending on what that Miami matchup looks like, in 2 weeks. Virginia on the road this week for Florida State coming up. So, yeah, I don't think there is one big bad, so to speak. There's not a final boss, and that's kind of been the story of the last couple of years in college football. Ohio State had the paycheck to the, bank statements to go along with it last year. They were Texas Tech last season, where everyone knew how much the roster cost. Love talking about it publicly. Didn't live up to it until that playoff run necessarily, and another loss to Michigan. Oh, Robe Fisher. How could you not mention the best 2 running backs in football? Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Yeah, shame on me from the Notre Dame conversation. Shout out. I do think Notre Dame probably has the best 2 backs in the sport. Very different players, too, which is awesome. Super complimentary. They're going to be the strength of that team. That right now, Notre Dame, an offensive football team, not a defensive football team. I know the folks at Missouri might have a word or two with that. Certainly the Penn State folks love their running back room, but pound for pound, I'll put Price and Love up with anybody in the country based on what we've seen so far. They've shouldered a ton of a load. Going to have to do it again. Arkansas rush defense, not the best in college football going into this weekend, so a great opportunity for those guys yet again. All right, quick reaction to the top 25, and then we'll get to the quarterback coaching trust, or the quarterback trust tree later in the show. New top 25, as we mentioned, some things to highlight here. Miami, up at number 2 in the latest poll, trailing Ohio State now. Penn State 3, Oregon 6 as they get set to square off this week. And leaning Oregon early on that one. Dante Moore, I watched a little bit of them finally. I know they didn't beat Oregon State by maybe as much as they wanted to this last week. That dude, You can see why he was so highly sought after coming out of high school. An absolute mutant arm on that kid who can let it rip. Notre Dame sitting at number 22, trailing USC, one spot ahead of Illinois, fresh off that tough loss against Indiana. Indiana, by the way, shout out to Kurt Cignetti. Talk all your stuff just outside of the top 10 and going to be flirting with it soon. That team, O-line, D-line team, just like they were last year. Fernando Mendoza looks like one of the better quarterbacks in the sport, just like he was for a stretch last year. 5 touchdowns in 3 quarters for him. Second time he's done that so far this season. The only IUQB ever to do that. Building off of last year pretty well. Kurt Cignetti said they beat up on top 25 teams. I don't think Illinois was really a top 10 team, but early in the season, that's how it goes. They're still a good veteran team. And Indiana, that game was not close. Again, Texas Tech, Utah, that was a close football game with a bad final score. This final score was 100% indicative of how far the margin between these two teams was. So credit to Indiana there. But Notre Dame, I think right where they need to be at this point, probably like 2 close losses to the number 2 team and the number 9 team in college football. Texas and Arch Manning still flexing over Sam Houston at the 10 spot there. Texas, I still don't know what to do with that team. Really good defense. I understand right now the offense, like the points technically all count and say some impressive things. And Arch Manning looked more comfortable, but I still need to see it against real competition before I'm going to believe that he's made the strides he's meant. Texas Tech absolutely deserves to keep climbing. They're right where they need to be, just on the outside of that top 10 looking in. Vanderbilt, said this last week, not a plucky underdog story, just a good football team at this point. You're going to continue to see that going forward. Michigan up to 19. Like, they're going to all have plenty of opportunities. I think this top 25 looks about how you'd expect. LSU is going to be the interesting one. Brian Kelly was really candid about Garrett Nussmeier and the injury stuff that he's been dealing with. Having him out there this weekend, I thought was a move you could question, but wanting to keep him in rhythm and keep this thing moving as they get set for a really interesting tilt with Ole Miss, especially based on some of the online gossip about who certain linebackers are or aren't dating. We can get to that story another day. Before we go, let's get to the quarterback trust tree. Take a look at some of the quarterbacks for contending teams and who we trust the most going down the stretch of the season. Doesn't necessarily mean they're the best, but this is about trust. Could only put one up top here, so I chose Carson Beck. Veteran option, well-protected, and healthy at this point. Garrett Nussmeier was my number 1 quarterback coming into the season, and on his best day, I still think he is the one. But that offensive line lost 4 NFL players on it from last year. They've been struggling to reset the line of scrimmage. You saw that against a Florida team that was able to keep it closer for longer than people expected. Quite honestly, the 2 in the middle there might be the most pure arm talent of this group. Dante Moore looks sensational as a talent in Oregon, finally getting a chance to be the guy. Will Stein continues to coach that position really well. But Carson Beck, again, because of the circumstance of what he's put on tape and the fact that he's healthy, I'll give him that top spot right now. Nuss and Moore in that second spot. And then the third tier of this, like Arch Manning to me should be in a 4th tier on his own because I don't trust him at this point as much as I trust any of the rest of these guys. John Mateer has been incredible running the football. The passing still needs to be a little more consistent against the best competition. Good win for them against Auburn this weekend in the Jackson Arnold Bowl. Bonafide Heisman contender, no doubt about it. And Drew Aller, like that Penn State offense still hasn't taken off the same way people expected going into this year. We know the label that's on Drew Aller that was coming into this year based on some of the big games from last year. So again, I'd have him down at the bottom, but really Mateer and Aller probably more on the same plane than Arch is at this point, who's still, like, and this is not Arch's fault. People keep trying to insert him in conversations he does not need to be in yet. Let him go out here, get things done. If we're going to talk about young quarterbacks making their starts, though, I'd put C.J. Carr above Arch Manning at this point. He looks pretty great, but Notre Dame's 1-2, so we won't talk about that. I understand I might get the homer label, but that's the reality. All right. So that's a look at some of the trust there. I'm sure you all agree wholeheartedly with all of my takes and the way I've structured it here right now. If not, get at us in the chat every Monday at 5 o'clock here on the BR College Football Show. We'll be here to break it all down, look at some of the biggest headlines, answer your questions. Where is Fernando Mendoza? Long, that's a great question. He was not on the list of quarterbacks I was given to rank in this. If you were going to ask me to put him up in that group, though, would have a hard time not having him on tier 1, like, if I was going to knock someone out of tier 2 for him at this point, maybe Dante Moore just because it's early. Fernando Mendoza, though, I would trust as much as any of the quarterbacks in the country. And what they're asking him to do in that offense, go out there, run a lot of heavy RPO stuff, put the ball in the right spots. He's got a strong enough arm to do it. He's accurate enough to do it. It might not be as sexy and gaudy as some of the other teams necessarily, but it's highly effective. So Fernando Mendoza is absolutely a tier 1, tier 2 guy right now. And I know for buddies of mine like Nate Tice over at The Athletic, firmly believe, or over at Yahoo Sports, firmly believe that he can be an NFL quarterback. I think Nate has him as his top quarterback right now from this class for the 2026 NFL draft. So tons of respect for Fernando Mendoza. Certainly don't mean to leave him out. There should have been probably a lot more Indiana football discussion in this show, but Curt Cignetti can continue to weaponize that and motivate his football team. He's done an outstanding job of that so far. Indiana football is real and spectacular. So I'm sure we'll be talking about them again next week. We'll be back here as we are every week, 5 o'clock Eastern on Monday in the Bleacher Report app on YouTube. Thanks so much for checking us out. We'll talk to you then.